Hey guys, Stealth here. In this video we're having a look at a Commonwealth Motorized deck, and those motorized decks usually don't have a lot of armor. They do have a lot of mobility, and that is something that the Commonwealth definitely has. This deck seems to be geared towards mobility. And as BriskKhan, who sent me this deck, mentioned in his description, he uses it to support armored decks. So it is going to be used in a tandem. You don't want to use this thing on its own, although it can do that. It's not my personal playstyle to use this thing in a 1v1 or 2v2 because I don't think that it has the pushing power to make it happen. But we're going to find out because BriskKhan has challenged me to crush Red 4 beneath my boots with this deck. Now first off we're going to have to review it, see if it's any good and see what other changes could be made to maybe further improve upon this deck. Logistics I think we can be pretty brief about. You want to have one command section, preferably in a helicopter, but you don't get any of those within a motorized deck. So we're just going to have to use standard command infantry, and they do come in as Saxons, so they are going to be very quick. Second command vehicle is the Iltis CP. Might be a bit much to have 9 command vehicles in here. The deck is geared towards 10v10, so I think that with that, considering that you usually have quite a bit of allies there, that is, if no one decides to leave, maybe you don't need 9 CVs. Maybe we can just bring one more Aslav CV, which is a very decent CV because it also carries some armor, and have enough in the number of 7. So I'm going to delete one of those Iltis and get an Aslav C in there. I made this change because this one can sustain some artillery fire. Of course a Smirch is going to kill it anyway. But some mortar or artillery fire might still, or after a couple of rounds of those, the unit might still be there. A fob, a Chinook to make sure that you can resupply your units, and then an HLVW. Seeing as this deck with all its infantry is geared towards supporting armored decks or to capturing the middle ground in a 10v10 where there's usually quite a bit of towns, I don't think that having 2 choppers for this deck would be a good idea. So having 1 card of cargo trucks which get their supplies from a Chinook and then the Chinook flies back to the fob would be a good idea. So I'm just going to leave this as is. Now BriskKhan also mentioned that he wants to do an early land grab, and we're going to do that with a couple of helicopters. So what we need is SAS. We got those in the Puma, and we got the SAS-R in the Chinooks. So comparing these, you can see that the SAS has the AT4 and the Stinger, with the SAS-R have a machine gun as well, a saw. So with these you're going to be more effective at taking out infantry than the SAS, but if you combine them you have a force that can engage tanks at short range, tanks at even shorter range, aircraft, helicopters and infantry. Of course they're still pretty vulnerable, because they don't really have the strength like a tank to survive. But if we can keep moving them to cover, making sure that they're never going to be staying too long in the same position, then this shouldn't be a problem. Then he has 1 card of Milan 2 in the Saxon. Let's see what other ATGMs we can offer this deck. Unfortunately it's only the Milan 1 or the 2, and in that case I do prefer the 2. Because the 2 has just a little bit more accuracy and a lot more EP power. So if you park these Milan 2s in a building somewhere, especially in an ambush position, you're going to take down quite a few tanks. Keep in mind though, 40% accuracy will not guarantee a hit, so you may have to rearm these guys, especially if you got a larger armored offensive coming at you, to make sure that these guys can stay firing. Nothing I would change so far. So far I'm pretty happy with this deck. Let's see what he also has in this deck. Some more Highlander 90s. Coming with the Eric's launcher. He has 14 of these at the hardened variety. Combining with 16 diggers and 12 commandos. It's definitely geared towards infantry combat, and it should be because it's motorized. It doesn't have a lot of armor. I'm not going to change too much in here because I want to see how this deck performs as is. It would be nice to get some IFVs, but of course a motorized deck doesn't get any of those, so I'm pretty far outside of my usual comfort zone with the mechanized decks. And that's why I'm going to keep the higher number of infantry in here, to make sure that I can either overwhelm the enemy or keep my supplies coming in as my units on the front take some heavy beatings. So we're just going to leave this as is. Support, let's have a look. One card of Centurion Marksman. This is a decent self-propelled anti-air gun. The motorized decks don't get too many of them. For some reason you don't get the British ones, where they have access to the Challenger Marksman and the Centurion Marksman, I believe. But for some reason we don't get access to that. So what we got is the Falcon, which is definitely far underwhelming compared to the Centurion Marksman. 2800 meter range, 26-25 against airplanes, higher accuracy, more armor. So yeah, the Marksman is a good choice. The one change that you might want to make is changing this from 8 to 6, so switching it up to hardened. But I think that you may need the high amount of AA, because otherwise they only got Wolverines and a couple of ADATs. You don't really get a lot of AA. Of course you can get the tracked rapiers, but I think that those things are pretty crap. The thing is with this deck that we don't have any long range AA yet. We don't have anything that can take down airplanes at a decent range, because even the Wolverine is geared towards anti-helicopter warfare. Hang on, this is the ADATs I'm looking at. The Wolverine has a range of 1960 versus airplanes. So what we could do is change that up, get the Wolverine out, because with these guys they're combined into pretty much the similar task. The Centurion goes for helicopters and so does the Wolverine, so I think that's redundant. So what we're going to do, take an other missile defender, something that has the most decent range against airplanes, and there's not that many of them. And that's the only unit that remains, is the tracked Rapier FSA with an accuracy of 60%. That's very high, but we only get 6 or 4, and they only have a 3-kilometer range, which is far underwhelming if you compare that to other AA platforms from other countries. I did consider the Stormer or an extra card of ADATs, but both of these, while they are very flexible units, they do offer a lot of variety in the deck, are not going to help me stop any airplanes. So with that we're going to take 6 tracked Rapiers. Intentionally select 6 to make sure that I can spread them out a little bit. If I would have just take 4 and some of them would get destroyed by either a seed run or artillery, that would be pretty much half the AA capability done. I don't want that to happen, so we're just going to take 6 of them. The ADATs are definitely nice all-rounders. They can take down tanks, they can take down helicopters and airplanes. You could say that with the Marksman we already got a decent AA platform, because it can engage helicopters at a good range. This one has an even bigger range, or an even higher range against helicopters. 45% accuracy is not stellar, but I would not take 4 of them at hardened. I would take 6 of them at trained, because these things can do anything, pretty much. The only thing that they cannot engage very well is infantry, but otherwise they can engage vehicles, airplanes and helicopters, and that's why I want to have more of these guys. Then finally he has a couple of mortars in here. With all the infantry, mortars are the best solution, because they are going to be a lot faster to fire than, for example, the Abbott, and they have a lot better accuracy. So we're just going to leave the Bison 81mm in. Then, this is the entire selection of tanks that you can get in this deck. Not a lot, and you're gonna have to use them pretty sparingly and in the right role, because these things, for example, are not tank killers. You don't have a tank killer which only has 10 frontal armor. But if you can have these guys ambush someone or engage IFVs and APCs, you're going to be doing pretty well, because they do have a high accuracy, high stabilizer and a high AP power. So especially in an ambush position, these guys might be able to take down a tank or 2. He has 12 of them in the deck. I think that you're going to need those 12. I know that for tanks having an upvet to hardened would make a very significant difference, but I don't mean to expose these guys too much. So hopefully I won't need the hardened experience on these guys. Then BriskKhan selected the Leopard AS1 Plus. It's pretty similar to the Leopard C2. Difference being the lower amount of armor on the tank. Pretty much the same gun with the same stabilization. but 1 less AP power, and the rate of fire is the same. So these things can do pretty much exactly the same thing, although the C2 can do it slightly better than the AS1 Plus. And with that, I don't think that the AS1 Plus really deserves a role in this deck. It's nice to have 24 leopards on standby, but I'd rather introduce a little bit more variety so that we have a little bit more flexibility in the deck. And Scorpion 90s might be interesting because they're fast, they're small, they have medium optics. Their gun isn't stellar, but they only cost us 30 points, and with that they might be able to support an infantry push. So I'm going to take those out and get 16 hardened Scorpion 90s in. Moving on to reconnaissance, 4 recce's, 4 pathfinders, so these are passive spotters. You could say more passive spotters, which might be too many of them. And I would not take them in the Grizzly, I would instead take them in a CH-147. Because with this you got a little bit more maneuverability on them. And I think that the pathfinders are geared mostly towards warfare. They got a law, they got a carbine, they're a 10-man squad. I don't intend to use them as such. And seeing as this thing is geared towards 10v10, I think that having 4 recce in here might already be enough. So I'm going to delete these pathfinders and then see what other units we might be able to use here. The LRPV might be an interesting unit. It's fast, it has exceptional optics, medium stealth, as almost all recon units, and it carries a grenade launcher. So if we're dealing with other infantry, this might be an interesting unit. The problem is that it doesn't have any armor. And of course, being a motorized deck, you don't get that many units that do have armor. You do get the Aslav S, but the Coyote pretty much takes up that role. I believe they are pretty similar vehicles, with the Coyote having a better gun than the Aslav, whereas the Aslav has exceptional optics versus very good. Yeah, it's hard to pick something that can really do the job here. Cougars. These guys might be an interesting choice, because this Bushmaster is stabilized, although not very well. They're pretty cheap, they got good optics. And these guys, if we combine them with the infantry from the infantry tab, we should have a decent push. We got the Bushmasters on these guys, we got the Scorpion 90s with their main guns, and we got a couple of Leopards further back, with an ADATS and a Centurion Marksman or 2 supporting a push. So let's take 8 of these, and with that I significantly increased the recon capability from 4 infantry to 8 vehicles. Then he has 1 Gazelle AH-1, exceptional optics, 310 kph, you can only get 4, but that should be enough. So good picks here. Then vehicles, which is another important slot for these guys. We got the Aslav 25 TOW 2. Good anti-tank vehicle, although it doesn't get that many anti-tank weapons. It only gets the TOW 2 with a very high accuracy and a very high AP power, but only gets 4 of those. So that's why the LAV-3 TUA is here, I suppose, for significantly improved anti-tank capability. Because with this you got the higher accuracy, the higher AP power, but you don't, the same accuracy I should say, but you don't get a Bushmaster, so you don't do anything against infantry. We got 1 activation point left. I've heard interesting things about the Vickers Mark 11. I haven't actually used it yet, but it seems to be a very mobile vehicle, very high AP power for a 50 point platform, good accuracy, so we're just going to give these things a try. Helicopters, Bushrangers are not really things that I usually use. They have an interesting rocket pod with a very high accuracy, but they're never going to do a lot of damage. So what we could do is get something that has slightly more suppressive rockets, because this thing only fires 14, and then the miniguns are going to be in range pretty much exactly at the same time that the infantry is going to get in range. So I don't think that this Bushranger is the best unit for this deck. I think that the CH-135 gunship might be better, because it carries those 70mm rocket pods, which are not heat, they don't do any AP power, but they can suppress other infantry. And we're just going to take 12 of those. If I'm going to use them, I'm going to swarm them. Then some TOW 2 helicopters, always a good idea to have these things in your deck. And if you really want to kill a heavy tank, you bring the Lynx 3. Also comes with stingers, but don't get this thing purely for the stingers, it's not worth it. You don't pay 110 points for a helicopter that only carries 4 stingers. Airplane wise, he has quite a few units in here. We got the Tornado F3, Air Superiority Fighter. Let's switch this to ASFs. You could get a Eurofighter Typhoon. They are, however, very, very expensive, and I don't really like only having one of those units, because if you lose it, you lose your Air Superiority Fighter. These things are probably the best option that they have to offer. You could go with the Tornado F2, but you're going to sacrifice some ECM and some weaponry. The Super Temp on the Sky Flash has better range against airplanes, so we're just going to keep this fighter in. Then he has the Kehu, definitely a great anti-tank unit. You do pay 125 points for them, so try not to lose them. Or if you want to send them out to the front line where they're going to kill something, make sure it's a very expensive vehicle. Like a couple games ago, I took out a T-80U. I lost my plane in the process, I believe, but the T-80U is worth something in the range of 200 points, so still worth it. Then he has a napalm bomber. Could be interesting. It's always nice to have the napalm capability in a deck, but I'm not sure how well the napalm is going to fit in this deck, especially in a 10v10. I don't really use napalm that much, and if I use it, it comes in a vehicle, because a vehicle is going to behave much more predictable than a plane. So we're going to delete that and see what other planes we can bring in. Sea Harrier FA2 here. You don't get that many seaplanes. You got the Electric Voodoo and the Sea Harrier. And the Sea Harrier is definitely a superior choice because it has better range, better accuracy, slightly less ECM, 10% less. It flies a little slower, its turn rate is a little higher, but I prefer the additional range on the alarms. So we're going to stick with that choice. And then there's the Hornet with 4 500 kilogram bombs, aim 9Ls, so it's a multi-role. This is the main bomber really. Another unit that's nice to have in here is the F111C. The thing is that these things have pretty different mission profiles. The F111C you can send in, well, really only when there is no AA around, because this thing only has 10% ECM and it's not very survivable. The Hornet is a lot more survivable because it carries 4 of these 500 kilograms and it has 30%. So this thing is actually capable of deflecting some missiles. With that, I still actually want to get the F11C in here. Let's see, I could switch this Hornet out and get a cluster bombing Hornet in, and then take the F111C. So now I have an air superiority fighter, an anti-tank plane, a seat plane, a cluster bomber which carries a lot of cluster bombs, keep that in mind, and the F111C to do bombings on large armored or vehicle pushes. Naval, he has a setup that is pretty much geared towards planes only. Tomcats, Super Hornets, Block 15s, LCUs and a Perry. I don't think he has enough ships to justify bringing an LCU, or at least it's not the way I would play. Of course there's no wrong in Wargame, there's just different playstyles. As I mentioned before, I usually go all airplanes or all ships, because coordinating the two is not easy. Giving 3 Oliver Hazard parries, or taking 3 Oliver Hazard parries, is going to be pretty weak-ish, because they're not supported by other ships which can defend them, like the Chamzeries. They don't have a harpoon that fires fast enough to kill other ships with that. And the missiles, the SM-1 MR Block 5, are going to run out pretty quick. I know that that's why the LCUs are here, but I don't think that this is the best setup. So for this section, let's go all planes. We're going to use aircraft, anti-plane, anti-interceptors. Let's see, the tram intruders are nice planes, but they do take quite a while to fire off their 4 missiles, which usually gets them into trouble, because it gets them in range of the enemy AA. The F111G pretty much has the same problem, but I believe it has slightly more range than the tram intruder. Sorry, never mind, they fire the same harpoon. With this, maybe the tram intruder got a buff because it now has 30% ECM. I'm not sure about that though. The CF-18 ASUW also carries harpoons and is faster to fire them. We can combine those with the Super Hornets, so we're going to take 2 of those. He has F-16A Block 15s, which carry a Penguin anti-ship missile. A pretty terrible anti-ship missile, really. 4,500 meter range is pretty bad, especially since most ships carry some very, very deadly long-range AA. So we're going to take these out. We're going to see what other units we can bring in. These Exo sets are pretty deadly, but you gotta swarm them, because these planes only carry 1 of them. Then there's the Tornado GR-1B, which carries 2 Sea Eagles. They have a pretty high AP power, compared to, for example, the 80 AP power on the Harpoon. They do have only 20% ECM, but they're very quick, 1000 kph. So let's just try these things. I haven't used them in a while. They may have been changed. Yeah, what to pick for the last card? The Tornado MFG, 4900 meter range. Yeah, let's just pick this. And now we have pretty much an all-plane setup. All different price points, but they all are here for exactly the same purpose: take down ships. Tomcats are here for air superiority, long-range interceptors. Don't get them into dogfighting because they don't do too well there with a 400 meter turn radius. But of course, we already got the Tornado F3s in here to make sure we can do that right. So with that, I think that this deck is just about ready to be taken into a 10v10. That's going to be the next video for today. I hope you liked watching this one. If you did, please hit like. And if you want to use this deck, the deck code is in the description below. Now lately, people have been having trouble importing the decks from the description. And it seems that Chrome is, or might be, the perpetrator. Because Chrome adds some hyphens, so dashes really, into the deck code. Possibly at the end, possibly at the beginning. I haven't seen this myself, because for me the deck codes always work. But that might be it. So when you're importing the deck for using the deck code, make sure that the browser hasn't copied any additional hyphens. If you're not sure what a hyphen is, it's the key next to the 0 on your keyboard. Anyway, that's this video done. I hope you liked it. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And I'll be seeing you in the next video, where we're actually going to take this deck out for a spin. See you next video.